Welcome to the Health and Wellness Marketplace. Here's your host, Laura Lewis.
Hello and welcome to the Health and Wellness Marketplace. I'm your host, Laura Lewis. We have a great show for you today. Before we get started, though, I want to encourage you to visit our website, thehealthandwellnessmarketplace.com. Here you can learn more about the show, our guests, and the products we feature in the marketplace. There is also a Contact Us link that you can use to give us your feedback or submit questions that you would like answered on the show. Stopping by the marketplace today is Richard Lentz, President of Seagate. Richard, how are you today?
Thanks for having me back. It's always fun flying to Texas here.
Always fun flying to Texas. Yeah, it's very exciting sometimes, I know. Let's start off the show by taking a look at this graphic that you brought in, Richard, right here. It says, allergic fungal sinusitis, AFS, is a rare disease of the sinuses affecting mainly young immunocompetent adults who complain of chronic sinus infections or nasal polyps despite medical and or surgical treatment. Now that is out of, so I can't even, that's from an Italian, it looks like an Italian journal.
Yeah, it's an Italian journal, 2003.
I mean, well, first of all, the study says immunocompetent. So that means that people who have good, healthy immune systems. Okay, that's important because most people believe that fungal infections can only be found in patients with compromised or weak immune systems, right, Richard?
Yeah, exactly. These are people that you can get a fungal infection in your sinus because of whatever bad drainage or you don't know why it's there, but they can form polyps and all sorts of problems. I think the statistics are, just in general, 15% of the U.S. population, then this was 10 years ago, I couldn't find anything closer, 37 million people have chronic sinus problems. And out of that, they estimate that $6 billion a year are spent by the U.S. chronic sinus sufferers trying to seek a remedy to it.
Well, I mean, you go into the drugstore, and I mean, there's an entire section dedicated to sinuses and allergy relief. I mean, honestly, the products go on and on.
Yeah, exactly, and a lot of them have, these are sprays that are going to dry the sinuses that become almost addictive, and then when you stop using them, you get the rebound, where the problem, the inflammation and the drainage originally were bad, and then it doubles up because you've stopped using that over-the-counter remedy. So I've tried that before. I've had some chronic sinus problems. I've also had polyps, and this show is almost dedicated to the chronic polyp that I just can't seem to get away.
Wow. Well, okay, so it was talking about really healthy people and how they can get fungal infections, and you're talking about in the sinuses and those. Well, how can that kind of thing happen to somebody that's basically pretty healthy?
Well, fungi, unlike bacteria, which very healthy people tend to be able to fight off bacterial infections, but fungi are just a different kind of animal where they get situated, especially in your sinus cavity, where there's limited blood flow and you don't have those white blood cells there to help attack it. Your sinus cavity is pretty much surrounded by bone. It's really hard to get into it. If occasionally when you have if you ever had a root canal on your upper molars, it's a real tricky thing because they're implanted into the bone that is directly below your sinus cavities. And so you've got areas of your body where you're really surrounded by bone, and it's very easy for that kind of infection to get established.
Okay, very good. Well, when we need to take a quick break right now, but when we get back, we have a very special guest joining us in the marketplace. So we'll be back in 1 minute with Richard Lentz.
Hey, Martha. So how are ya? Have you heard?
Heard what?
Seagate just came out with an all-natural bye-bye diaper rash formula, a spray with omega-3s that is safe and effective for my little one.
You're right, Barbara. He looks much happier now.
This will work for your Leon, too. Buy Seagate products at your local health food store or contact us direct.
Welcome back to the Health and Wellness Marketplace. I'm your host, Laura Lewis. We were talking with Richard Lentz about fungal diseases and sinuses. Joining us to further expand on fungal diseases is oncology nurse, author, and Call for Health host, Jamie Clark. Thanks for being here today, Jamie.
Thank you, Laura. It's so much fun being here.
How are things on your show, Call for Health?
They're great. Dr. David Holland and I are working on a new booklet, and we're just very excited. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so glad to have you here. I mean, this is an area of your expertise. That's why you're here. And Richard brought in a study I'd love for you to look at in relation to fungus and disease of the sinuses, that kind of thing. Let's take a look at that.
Okay. All right. Altogether, 619 strains of fungi were cultivated from the nasal mucus of 233 patients. If you look at those numbers, that means for every one patient, they had 3 different types of fungi, both from healthy people, which you were speaking about earlier, and from patients who suffer from chronic sinusitis. The most prevalent strains were these different types of fungi, which are Penicillium, Aspergillus, and a list of others. And we don't have to go through all these and memorize them. But the most important part of this to remember is not only did they have these fungi, but these fungi produce toxins. They're called mycotoxins. I know you've talked about them here on this show before.
Yes.
The Journal of the American Medical Association said these toxins can produce illness and sickness in our bodies. So it's very, very important that if you've been inhaling these fungi, to be able to get rid of them some way with some type of antifungal.
Yeah, truly. I mean, and I know that Richard has a nasal spray product that will address that too. Now, you have another graphic, though. Let's take a look at it. We have a second graphic.
Okay, it says fungal DNA were detected in almost 90% of patients with nasal polyps. And then it says after washing with the saline solution, the fungi's positive rate dropped. It says fungi are important in the pathogenesis of nasal polyps and chronic sinusitis. And basically what's that saying is as long as you use some type of solution, I mean saline, saline's normally found in our bodies. It doesn't even have an antimicrobial. But as long as you use this and flush out the sinus cavities, you'll see a marked improvement if you in fact do have fungus in your sinuses.
Yeah, it's so hard to know. I mean, it is right. We will open up the show talking about how many people, Richard, about that, it seems like everybody has a sinus infection at some point, or my sinuses are bothering me. Almost every day you can run into somebody, especially during certain times of the year, which is really interesting, isn't it? Because wouldn't there be more, maybe things floating in the air that might go up? I mean, really, and I have a question for you, by the way. I mean, how is it that fungus, is this something we'll be inhaling, or how does it get up there?
Yeah, well, do you want to go ahead and answer that?
Yeah, well, before I answer that one other thing that happens with sinusitis is one of the second things, especially with allergies that occur, is that, initially you'll have some secretions and drainage, but then the body tends to have inflammation in those cavities because the body's trying to shut down the entry of these organisms, and that just shuts down the drainage. So that what Jamie was saying was, if any kind of nasal irrigation, be it salt water, is going to help because you've locked in those deep sinus cavities, you've locked in the fungi. What was that next question?
Well, I was talking about, honestly, are they just floating in the air? I mean, we're just breathing them in, or how does that happen?
Yeah, no, they're in the air, and depending on the area of the country that you're living in and the type of house, you can have, a house that had water damage, and you'll have a host of fungi that are in the air. If you're living in the south part of the United States where there's a lot of rain and humidity, you're going to get fungi that are just part of your grass and your trees, and you can walk outside in Texas after you've had a rainy season, and you can almost smell the fungus that's in the air.
Oh, yeah, I know. I mean, and also, it's sort of to think about how molds, they actually have little mold spores, and they fly around. It's almost that sort of spacey sort of thing that you've heard about.
And even in dry areas where you have a lot of dust, or, say you're working on farms where you're around dirt, just by stirring up the soil, you're going to end up with the fungi that are in the soil that are naturally in there to be breaking down all the dead plants and fertilizers are going to come back up. You get a lot of sinus infections if you're a farmer working down there.
Now, you also have one more graphic. Let's take a look at that one there.
Recent trends of fungal infections in the ear, nose, and throat were introduced. Aspergillus, which is a type of mold, was the most common pathogen. Surgical removal of the fungus ball, or the aspergillus, and establishment of a drainage route, which is what Richard was talking about, to the nasal passages via surgery are effective to manage this aspergillus in your sinuses. And to go along with what Richard says, I mean, we have a lot of these big words, aspergillus or penicillin. People are familiar with penicillin because it's a medication.
Right.
The most important thing to remember is fungi are everywhere. They're ubiquitous, so we're always going to be exposed to them. That's That's why you should have prevention with some type of good nasal spray, as Richard, the Seagate company, has. But you also have to be really careful when you are in a moldy environment. I mean, if you think about the hurricanes from just a few months ago.
Sure.
These people are in an extreme environment where they are susceptible to getting these infections.
I have a brother-in-law down there that's doing rebuilding. He's part of the rebuilding process, and it's very difficult. It initially was pretty difficult to stay healthy in that environment.
It is. And just as Richard was saying, you could be a construction worker or a farmer, and so there's all different ways that you can be exposed to this. The most important thing to remember is the Mayo Clinic said it. You know, in 1999, they said 95% of sinus infections are in fact related to fungus. So it's not bacteria, it's not virus, that's very rare. Mostly it's fungus. So if you want to effectively treat your sinuses, you have to use a good antifungal.
You said 99%. The Mayo Clinic said that?
They said in 1999 they said 95%.
95%. Still,
right.
That's really high. I mean, honestly, you typically would go to that's bacterial, but it isn't.
Right, exactly. So it's important that you know what you're dealing with. You don't want to always have chronic sinusitis because you're constantly taking antibiotics and it doesn't get rid of the problem. You want to have a good antifungal.
Right, and you're not necessarily going to your physician. When you're complaining of sinus infection, you hardly ever hear your physician say, well, maybe it's mold, right?
Exactly,
Which
right.
is, I guess we all have to kind of get up to speed on this entire subject.
Well, how many people have had houses where a water pipe would break and their carpet gets soaked, but carpets cost a lot of money to replace, so you just let the carpet dry out, and then you end up just, you don't even pull it up and look that there's this black mold growing inside the carpet, and some of those molds are some of the most dangerous cancer-causing molds that are out there. I have a mother-in-law who she lives in a condominium. The upstairs apartment had a water leak. Nobody was there. They were actually out of the country. And it took a couple of days for the water to slowly percolate down through her ceiling, down into her walls, and into her carpeting and the insulation in her ceiling. And unfortunately, she hasn't moved. She just believed they came in and did a quick repainting job and pulled some of the insulation out. And this was 7-8 years ago, and to this day, she has continuous sinusitis. She has respiratory problems, and she just refuses to move.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, you think about that. What's even scarier is, infants and children, toddlers crawling around, and mothers can't figure out, why their babies always have runny noses. They're crawling around on a ground that's contaminated with mold.
Right, exactly. Wow, we're going to be talking more about this later in the show, but Jamie, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Thank you, Laura. It's fun.
Well, how can people find out more about your show, more information about that?
Well, we have a website. It's callforhealth.tv, so everyone can check that out and find out all types of information about myself and Dr. Holland and all of our guests.
Very good. Well, thank you so very much. I do appreciate it very much. We're going to take another break, but stay tuned for more with Richard Lentz right after this. Welcome back to the Health and Wellness Marketplace. I'm your host, Laura Lewis. Richard, we're talking about sinus infections. Boy, talking about that and fungal, cause of amazing statistic that the Mayo Clinic came out with that 95% of sinus infections can be correlated to mold, and it gives you a whole visual. Think about, my goodness, babies crawling around on carpets that may have been, saturated with water, then mold growing. I mean, it's something that really needs to be taken seriously.
And I'm actively fighting that, and I'm typical. For probably 2 years, my sinuses were getting a little bit clogged up, and I'm not one to go squirting sprays or saline solutions or even our own nasal spray until I feel sick. But I didn't feel sick because this is not an illness where you have a cold or a flu or something. I'm not running a fever. So I didn't even think of using the sinus or olive leaf nasal spray. And finally, one side of my nose got blocked up with a polyp, and I went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor because the other side was swollen. And this was actually, now that I understand it, a normal reaction from this kind of a fungal infection, that the air passages will inflame, shut down, and then I'm breathing out of my mouth at night, so I'm waking up 10 times a night with dry mouth.
And not sleeping well. Oh, my goodness. It's just a vicious cycle.
So I go into the ear, nose, and throat doctor, and he goes, well, you got a deviated septum, and that's helping to block the air passage, and we're going to do whatever that thing is called, where they cut the cartilage and realign the septum. And while I'm in there, I'm going to clean out all of these polyps. You've got tons of polyps and infections. So go through that a year and a half ago. cleans everything out, and suffer for 2 weeks with the nose all swollen up and can't breathe out of my nose still because he's got it all packed in with junk. And okay, I have 3 months where I am fine. There's no polyps there, and suddenly I'm starting to feel the one side of my nose is getting blocked up again. The darn polyp is growing back, and I'm not going to go back in for another operation. He's recommending, oh, I'll go back in there and I'll burn that thing out. That's not going to come back again.
Okay.
And he goes, is there a guarantee? He goes, no, there's no guarantee. And I think what happened is I'm ending up, again, I'm healthy. I've had a fungal infection, and I've been able to control it now because I learned about these articles. I've been studying up on fungal disorders of the sinuses. So I'll spray it for like a month. This is not like getting rid of a bacterial or
This is a stubborn
thing, yeah. So I'm irrigating it with a saltwater solution just to keep it clean, and I'm spraying with the olive leaf nasal spray. And after, it takes a good month, 2 months, finally the thing is shrinking, but it's not disappearing. But it's down to where I have complete unobstructed breathing through my nose, and I'm sleeping okay. So, okay, that's where I'm at now, is I am riding this roller coaster where the polyp pretty much disappears. I stop using the nasal spray because I'm not going to use it 24 hours a day all the time. Yeah, and then a couple of months later, it's starting to grow, and now I'm back on the show again with the polyp growing back, and it's generally a big pain to be living like that.
Yes, definitely, I know. But the alternative is surgery.
No, but I had the surgery and it didn't work.
I know, but again.
Yeah.
Now, you brought in some research about olive leaf, which is a known antifungal. Let's take a look at this graphic. Olive leaf water extract, or at 0.6%, killed almost all bacteria tested within 3 hours. Candida albicans was killed following 24 hours incubation. E. coli cells subjected to similar treatment showed complete destruction. That's from Mycoses 2003. Let's talk about that then in relation to that particular item there, your olive leaf products, and you've just mentioned the nasal spray. So how does this all kind of tie together?
Well, what we're doing is, that was a water extraction, and it almost made somewhat homeopathically, where they diluted it out to a 0.6% solution. What we're doing when we're creating the olive leaf extract powder, which is sitting here on that little white...
That's actual olive leaf extract, okay.
That's the concentrate.
Freeze-dried.
Freeze-dried, concentrated, actually spray-dried, because we were making a water-based solution.
In those big, I've heard you talk about that before, in one of those big, huge barrel type things, right?
Exactly.
And they spray-dry it,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it comes in as a liquid and it's sprayed into a vacuum, and then the water is actually boiled off, but at around 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the powder deposits on the base of the tank, and we just keep doing that for a couple of days in a row until we have enough powder to remove it. And at the same time, we're taking that powder and then we're doing another homeopathic extraction on it to make the olive leaf nasal spray and throat sprays. So we're coming up with something in the liquid form that's similar to what that article said, a 0.6%. But we're getting a lot better results than they were getting. But that is similar to, I've found studies that come from Italy and Greece where plants that were releasing the olive processed water, when they're processing whole olives, not even the olive leaves, we're finding that the water that was going through, they were dumping it back into the river because they figured, well, this is just, vegetable water, processed water, was killing a lot of the bacteria that were downstream and making the area downstream, all these, places that were dependent upon that for irrigation.
The good bacteria, okay.
Yeah, they were killing the fungi and the bacteria in the ground, so it was preventing the actual decomposition of the fertilizers.
Very interesting, very interesting. Talk about your testing of Seagate products. I believe you've got a graphic for that.
Yeah, I never was able on these shows to really open this up and show what happens during the various periods of time where we subjected the olive leaf nasal spray to an inoculum, 5 different microbes, E. coli, Staphylococcus bacteria, and Pseudomonas. Those are 3 bacteria. And then Candida, which is a fungus, and Aspergillus, which is a mold, a little bit tougher than a fungus. We tested it after 60 seconds, and these are the rates where you had 1 million colonies per milliliter initially, dropped to 4,100 colonies after 60 seconds of E. coli, 19,000 for the staph. Pseudomonas was less than 100. Candida was down to 10,000. Aspergillus was at 30,000. And then 6 hours later, there was no detectable levels of any of the initial 4, E. coli, staph, Pseudomonas, Candida, and Aspergillus was down to 1,600 colonies. And then finally, after 24 hours, we were almost completely free of everything, including Aspergillus was down to 20 colonies. And then it continued through the 30-day period right at 20 colonies, 10 colonies. It bounced up and down, but it didn't increase. And all that was required by the FDA for that test was to get it down to, well, we didn't have to reduce the Aspergillus. We just had to show that Aspergillus didn't grow. So we would have been allowed to maintain 1 million colonies per milliliter rather than dropping it down to 20.
Really? Wow. It is really impressive because the Aspergillus is a tough one to crack there. Got to take a quick break, but when we get back, we'll talk more about this very interesting subject with Richard Lentz right after this.
When those fungi and germs are getting you down, don't be sad. Reach for all-natural Seagate olive leaf extract. When those skin germs start attacking, apply Seagate Alleviate all-natural medicine. Buy Seagate products in your local health food store or contact Seagate Direct.
Welcome back. Okay, Richard, talking about, boy, those numbers can be I mean, that was a pretty impressive study relative to the impact of the olive leaf extract nasal spray, homeopathic remedy too, upon bacteria and molds. And I know you want to address a little bit more about that.
Yeah, remember, this was a homeopathic solution, so the nasal spray was at a 1/1000th of the original extract strength. And
way down.
Way down, yeah. The olive leaf throat spray and the earache remedy are 1,000 times stronger because we're not worried about irritating the sinus membranes. But when we were making the nasal spray, we were testing it at each different, 1x and 2x and 3x to see what would be the strongest strength that would not irritate the sinus cavities. And that was as far as we can get in terms of strength before we started having sinus irritation problems. Now, the important part, since this is a show about polyps and nasal fungi, and Aspergillus which appeared in every one of those studies that we had up on the screen before, that over time, and this is 24 hours where you've had this kind of result, you can reduce 1 million colonies down to 20 colonies.
Right.
So what I'm doing, and this is the way I'm controlling my polyp, my pet polyp that follows me around, because I'm not going to go back to the ear, nose, and throat doctor and have another operation because he's already shown that you can take out the polyps and the polyps come right back again, is I am irrigating it when I think about it, when it's really annoying me. I'll hit it 2 to 3 times a day, and I'll start taking the olive leaf extract again. Now, being that it's cloaked inside of a polyp is just like a big pimple. And it's got a lot of skin around it, so you got to keep that polyp soaked with the nasal spray to expect that some of it is going to slowly percolate its way in and go after the fungus. Okay. Just by spraying it one time isn't going to do anything to it. You got to just keep that thing soaked several times a day, and that is that's why I'm riding on this roller coaster, where over a period of a year and 3 months, I've been able to make that polyp shrink. And then it comes back probably 3 or 4 times. I haven't figured out yet when it's inside of a polyp whether it's just shrinking down to where I don't notice it anymore and I'm stopping using the nasal spray, or whether eventually there might be something. If I just stay on it maybe for 3 or 4 months after it shrinks, maybe I can finally get it to go away. But that's the mystery. But that's where I'm at right now.
Definitely is a mystery, because you said in previous shows and even earlier on that how the sinus cavities are just, I mean, there's not a lot of room in there, and it can easily get occluded or trapped, and boy, yeah, I bet they can hide in all sorts of places for sure. And since we only have a few seconds left, truly, I wanted to ask you about children and the nasal spray. How often and how much? Is it safe?
Yeah, it's perfectly safe, although we have to put on the container that children under 3 years of age should seek the parents should seek the advice of a healthcare professional.
Okay.
But these are homeopathic ingredients, and there's really no problem. Since we've made it, we haven't had a single case of any adverse reaction, any problem with any mother and any kid. So be on the safe side. If in doubt, ask your physician, but there won't be anything that can hurt the baby in it.
Right, exactly. And so, and also, just a brief mention real quickly, is that taking olive leaf extract on occasion is going to help keep your body kind of up to fighting speed for all this. Well, thank you so much, Richard. I really appreciate it very much, your presence talking about this subject. And that's all the time we have today on the show. But if you'd like more information about Seagate and all of their amazing products they offer, you can call 888-505-GATE or 4283, or visit their website at seagateproducts.com. Richard, thank you again for stopping by the Health and Wellness Marketplace. And to all of you at home, thank you for visiting the market as well. We're open again tomorrow at the same time, same place, so be sure to tune us in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. I'm Laura Lewis. See you next time on the Health and Wellness Marketplace. Have a super day.